All right, so today we're going to look at political cartoons. We've done work with political cartoons in the past. Um, this time we're going to look at political cartoons dealing specifically with stuff from the 1970s. A good way to think of political cartoons is that they are memes that just aren't on social media. That would be the best way to think about political cartoons. They convey a message. There's lots of layers of meaning and lots of layers of information kind of buried in the cartoon. Just really quick, some of the key components of a cartoon. There's symbolism, where they use different objects or symbols to represent ideas or concepts or events. So symbolism, like Uncle Sam, the image of Uncle Sam, he's a symbol for the United States. Labeling, very often in political cartoons, they will literally write on an object to let you know what that object is supposed to be or what that object represents. Caricature, which is where they exaggerate or distort a person's features. They do it with every president. With Barack Obama, they exaggerated the size of his ears. He had very large ears, and they exaggerated the size of his ears. So when you looked at a political cartoon of Barack Obama, you went, "Dope, I know exactly who that is." With Donald Trump, they exaggerated his hair. He had a very unique hairstyle and the length of his tie. He liked his ties very, very long. And so in political cartoons, he's usually depicted as having a very long tie and a very, oh, exaggerated hairstyle sticking out all over. With Joe Biden, they exaggerate his eyes. He has very squinty eyes, so it always looks like in political cartoons, he always looks like he's kind of squinting. So there's caricatures where they exaggerate physical features of a person. An exaggeration where they show an object being much larger than when it really is to show that, gosh, this is really hard. Or they exaggerate the size of an object to make it look very, very small to show, well, this is not a big deal, right? They exaggerate that. An analogy, comparing two different things that are very dissimilar from each other, not unlike that are unlike each other. So they uh, use an analogy to kind of get their point across. Um, an analogy would be very similar to oh gosh, I can't think of one right off the top of my head, but it's a comparison between two things. Irony, which is the way things should be or the way things are compared to the way they actually are, the way they should be, right? And irony, you hear people say, well, that's rather ironic, meaning that's not really what was supposed to happen. Okay. And then stereotyping. And stereotyping very often is just a very generalized uh, grouping of people or groups of people or individual people, and in trying to break that group down to one very, very simple characteristic. It can be very insulting, it can be very untrue, but you see stereotyping quite often in political cartoons. So if we look at the first political cartoon here, you can see there's a maze, right? And it's a very complex, complicated maze. And it says Vietnam right on the front of the cartoon here. So this maze represents Vietnam. Vietnam is a maze. It's very complex to get out of. And in the middle of the picture here, you see what looks like a guy in coattails and a top hat. If it was a little more detailed and blown up, you would see that it's Uncle Sam. Again, Uncle Sam is a symbol, that's a symbolism for the United States. And he's climbing up this ladder into a helicopter that says US. So it represents the United States escaping from Vietnam, from the maze of Vietnam. They couldn't figure their way out, so they had to be rescued. So if you look at what are some of the things you initially look at in this cartoon, you can see the maze, you can see the cartoon, you can see Uncle Sam. What's the symbolism? Well, the symbolism would be the maze itself, right? Vietnam was a very complex, difficult situation. Uncle Sam, right here, that would be a symbol as well. Um, what's labeled in the cartoon? You can see Vietnam very clearly labeled here. And the helicopter US, this helicopter representing the United States. What's the exaggeration in the cartoon? So in this cartoon, the exaggeration would be the maze itself, right? And what does it represent? It represents that this was a very complex problem that the United States they got into, and they just couldn't figure out how to get out of. So that would be the exaggeration. Very much like the symbolism. They're in this case, they're both the same, which can happen. And what can you infer the message to be of this cartoon? What's it trying to say? Well, it's trying to say that the United States couldn't figure out Vietnam. They got in there and then they got lost and they couldn't figure it out. And so before they could finish it, before they could get out of there, they had to be rescued, and they just left in the middle of the war. So that's political cartoon. Um, that's kind of the analysis you're going to have to do with these political cartoons. And as you go through, there's several different cartoons here. As you go through, you're just going to employ these strategies that I just kind of modeled for you. Remember to keep in mind that what these different elements of the political cartoon are: the symbolism, labeling, caricature, exaggeration, analogy, irony, stereotyping, as you go through here. And then answer the questions. Make sure when you answer the questions, you answer them fully and completely. Don't give me yes or no answers or very simplistic answers, right? Explain what your answer means according to that cartoon. All right. Good luck. Make sure you turn it in, and we'll talk to you later.